afternoon, everyone. My name is Carla Abreu, and I'm Community and Program Manager at Singularity University, Portugal, working together with Nova Business School of Economics in this initiative. I have the pleasure to be your host for today's webinar, Intro to Exponentials, an initiative that is part of the Role to Play campaign promoted by Nova SPE that aims to help our community to deal with the several challenges in the current context. Once again, we have the presence of Manuel Tanger, Singularity University Portugal faculty, our innovation expert and also an entrepreneur that has been working with some of the biggest companies in Portugal, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. Today, more than ever, we have seen the exponential concept being used to explain all the changes that the world is facing in the current context, challenging companies, leaders, co-workers, and of course the society. Manuel will help us to understand this exponential mindset. Before we start, some technical informations. Please feel free to use the Q&A area in the bottom of your screen to ask your questions that will be answered in the end of this session. The chat is mainly used for technical issues. And now, to learn more about the topic of this session, I'll leave you with Manuel.
Thank you, Carla, for that really nice intro. Let me just add this here. And it's a real privilege to be here. Hi, everybody. And having a role to play. And for us, that means sharing some of the technologies, the frameworks, the thoughts, the thought leadership that at Singularity we've been having for the last decade. And bringing it in a moment where I think is even more relevant. So just picking up on what we we talked about last time. We covered what an exponential is. It's a curve that grows. We compared it with the unfortunate curve happening now with COVID. We talked about how computing power, memory, and all this technology is actually following an exponential curve and growing exponential. We talked about Moore's law. We saw that innovation itself is growing exponential because it's a cumulative effect and things help each other to keep on growing and fuel its growth. We gave the example of genetics and DNA sequencing and the dramatic drop in price and performance that has happened. And we ended with a framework from exponential companies, which is Ideas Scale, to help companies, entrepreneurs, people who want to embrace new challenges and new projects to do it in an exponential way from the start. And we ended by a challenge to you to think and act big. Now, exponentiality is something that, while we recognize it mentally and theoretically in the technology and the things that we see around us, it's not very intuitive. And one of the founders of Singularity University, Peter Diamandis, has developed a framework that is very helpful for all of us to look at and understand exponentials and identify them. And it's called the 6 Ds of disruption. So the 6 Ds are actually 6 things that start with a D. And the first one is digitized. We talked about this last time. That is, when any kind of technology process goes digital, it gets on this exponential curve. And you have the example of music that went digital to CDs and now streaming, to images and video that you have, for example, in your screen, to text that was handwritten and printed on paper that is now digital, and to DNA, which we saw last time. And once it starts getting on this digital path, well, it starts getting exponential all the time. It's like a rule of nature. But the thing is, when it starts, it's not very impressive at all. And that's actually the deceptive phase of the 6 Ds framework. Because you look at the technology and you compare it to existing solutions that are not yet digital, and typically they are far worse. We'll see an example later that is just far terribly worse, could not be used in any case. But the thing is, since it's at an exponential, it keeps on improving annually. Its performance increases, its cost diminishes, to a point where all of a sudden it crosses this threshold of the current technology that was not digital, and all of a sudden it just keeps on going up while the other one grows linearly. And when that happens, it surprises a lot of people, except those that recognize the exponential growth of these technologies. And that's something that I would like you to be aware of and look around you in terms of the businesses, the products, the services, that actually follow these curves that may not be impressive at the beginning, but they keep on growing and improving exponentially. So one of the things is, don't look at how things are, project and see how they will be. So once we move from the deceptive phase, it crosses that threshold and it becomes disruptive because it's just too fast for the linear model to keep up with. And we have examples of this on your phone, which is a critical one. And basically, once that happens and it becomes disrupted, things become dematerialized. I mean, look at the features that you have on your phone, where you have books, cameras, videos, GPS, music, maps, a phone, a flashlight, radio. All of this, you needed different apparatuses, different technologies, different frameworks, a lot of volume to take with you, and it didn't interoperate. Now it's all digital. Now it can be held in a device, and it's getting smaller, and all of a sudden it'll be in your glasses, and all of a sudden it'll be just everywhere. And you have a practical example, another one in your life, which is your desk right now, where I think most of you are looking at this. And it's gone from something full of equipment, from printers and computers and books and a globe and contacts and cameras, and it's all reduced to a laptop, which has all these things dematerialized. Impressive. In 20 years, you got rid of all that and even became more efficient and connected with the rest of the world. Once that happens, things get demonetized. We saw this example of computers. Basically, the computing power that you have for now was millions and millions of euros just a couple of years or 10 years ago. And demonetization leads to democratization. You have it spread out everywhere. You have it very cheap, and it becomes a force and a law of nature around you. So this framework of 6Ds allows you to, one, understand what technologies can become exponential, the ones that are digital, allows you to look at the current progress and the current rate of these technologies and see at what point it is. Has it gone through the deceptive phase? Is it already disruptive, or is it still underperforming? But it's growing. And you know that it dematerializes, it just disappears and is available to you around, demonetizes, and becomes democratized. 6Ds, keep them in mind, make it a mental gymnastics that you have whenever a new technology, a new way of working, a new system comes out. Where on the curve does it fit? Which of the Ds has it already manifested? So let me give you an example. We saw this last time. A bunch of different areas, from biotech, artificial intelligence, nanotech, you name them, are being disrupted through these exponential technologies. And today we're going to look at energy and storage. Energy and storage, and now, especially with the renewable energy, we can focus on solar and wind, has gone through dramatic changes. Consider that in 1980, for you to, the cost of a kilowatt hour was 55 cents, which was around 9 to 11 times the cost of the retail price of energy at the time. So of course it's underperforming. Would you pay 10 times more electricity because it's solar? No, you wouldn't. Nobody did. And actually, people thought that the evolution would be linear, as they typically do. But what happened was that 10 years later, it was 26 cents, half the price. 10 years later, 7 cents. And in 2019, well, hold on, we'll get to 2019. This drop from the 70s or 80s till now was 250 times the price. These numbers are just huge. It's not 100 times, it's not 200 times, it's 250 times. So basically, it's technology that was terrible, that is outperforming the current ways to produce electricity, like coal, like natural gas, you name it. So what happened in 2019? In fact, the lowest bid in the world came from Portugal, a French company named Akuo, that was offering 1.48 cents per kilowatt hour. And this happened here last summer in Portugal, and it is currently still the world record. But it won't stop here. This is where we're at now. Remember, it's already disruptive, but it's keeping on in an exponential curve. And when you look at these technologies, you also think, okay, good. We have a few production of solar energy, but we need a lot of this in en masse, right? We need a lot of volume. Great. So when we look at the adoption rate and the amount of power being produced in the world through solar versus the predictions that happen, which is our colored lines, there is a huge mismatch, which means that experts looking at the sector are totally off when they project the adoption of solar, because every year they have a projection. They say it's going to be more or less linear. No, it keeps on going exponential. The next year, same linear projection. No, it's exponential, and on and on and on. And so we have faith at Singularity that these technologies will continue to grow exponentially, and we have proof for it because it's been going on in the past and in a whole bunch of different sectors that feed each other to continue this growth. To give you an idea, nowadays the cheapest production of energy per kilowatt hour is around 6 cents for natural gas. Coal, I don't think you can reach such low prices. So we talked about solar, and on the other side we have wind. Same story. 1980s cut you 57 cents, pretty much the close to the 77 cents that solar cost. In 1990, 17. In 2000, only 7 cents. And today, 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's more competitive, solar and wind, compared to any other source of electricity. And this is also perfect because if you compare the cycle of a day or the cycle of a year, they compensate each other. Meaning that at night you have more wind, during the day you have more sun. In Portugal, it's actually excellent at this because we have both wind and sun. And the same cycle happens during the year. You have more wind during the winter and more sun during the summer. So basically, this is where we stand at a completely revolutionary phase in energy, which is solar energy, be it onshore and wind onshore or offshore, is cheaper than any other way to produce electricity. So here is yet another example of an exponentially growing technology that leads to this, a world of abundance. And a large part of the exponential mindset is an abundance mindset, is thinking that energy is tending to zero cost, is thinking that computing power is going to infinity, that the storage capacity that you have for information is going to cost zero and you can hold information everywhere, that 3D printing is here to stay and will be around us with a whole bunch of materials being 3D printed and added in the process. So this is the key learning, is project forward, not linearly, but exponentially. And the world, because mostly of these technologies, has had a dramatic change in its history. Things like life expectancy, that from the early 1900s has been steadily going up, more than doubling from the roughly 30 years average from the beginning. But this is impressive if we look at this time scale. If you look at the bigger time scale from when we're on Earth, it looks something like this. It's a huge, steep increase. This is unprecedented. It's incredible. And this is going through a whole bunch of different KPIs and metrics that we're measuring and that have impact on our lives, but on Earth as a whole. Another example, child mortality. Portugal is an exceptional example of this, where we've been reducing it, and we're one of the examples in the world. And it's been going down and down and down since the 1850s to something that is almost immeasurable in going down to zero. The number of extreme poor, even while the population is growing very rapidly since the 1950s, we've been able, as a species, to reduce the extreme poor in the world. This is a double win if you look at it. And you're right if you're thinking that 500 million or 0.8 billion people still extremely poor is unacceptable. But you have to distinguish two things, which is progress, and you should always be happy with the progress and make a show of this progress, but do not conclude it, do not satisfy if the progress is not enough and is not the end point. Right? So do not be discouraged by the end result yet, because the progress is being made at a very steep rate. Next, electricity. Almost all the world is electrified except the Saharan African area where, hey, it's very sunny. Hey, the cheapest way to produce electricity now, solar. So I predict a very fast electrification for these areas that are not yet electrified. Literacy. And a huge effort has been made since last century, 1900s, and it's been dropping radically down, and we are around 10% nowadays, which is, again, is 10% acceptable? No. Has the progress been made good? Absolutely. So we should celebrate that. Number of internet users, keeping growing. We're around 4 billion. We're going to reach, some experts say, in the next 7 years, full population, or as close as we can to full population, and everybody will be connected somehow to the internet and make use of all this knowledge, connectedness, possibilities that arise from, hey, what we're doing right here, right? And on top of that, we're living in a very, very peaceful time. I mean, don't let the news elude you about the violence, about the deaths, and we're still living in relatively calm in terms of war, in terms of deaths, in terms of homicides, and it's been going down for a considerable amount of time. So we are, in fact, in this great era of acceleration. And yes, we do have the acceleration of some bad effects as well, like climate change, of course, like we saw the poor, which are not growing but are still too big. And so we have big problems to solve. Okay, but we're tackling them with tech, we're tackling them with our motivation, and from them being a big focus. Now, if you're thinking about, okay, we're in a crisis right now, and COVID is affecting the economies, and COVID is affecting healthcare, sure, of course, undeniable. But if you look at the growth of the GDP in all our history, again, an incredible chart, unprecedented, now reducing it from the 1900s till today, you can see that First World War, the Spanish flu, the Second World War, all these crises that have been happening, the Cold War, did not affect the growth of GDP. Now, sure, GDP is not a perfect measure, but it is a measure to identify the progress that we're making. We're moving in the right direction. These things are hard, harsh, they need our full attention. They do not stop us. They will not stop us. And I want to move to the final topic I bring to you, which is picking up on what we said last time on exponential organizations and the framework of scale ideas, where you have interfaces, dashboards, experimentation, autonomy, social technologies on one side, and staff on demand, community and crowd, algorithms, leveraged assets, and engagement, if you remember. But I took one thing off, which actually is the first one that an exponential organization needs. And it is a massive transformative purpose, the MTP. It is a highly aspirational purpose. It's more than a mission. It's not a vision. It's a purpose, right? It's something that you believe in very strongly, that is aspirational for you, that is audacious. It's huge, right? It's massive. Hopefully it's unique to your organization, and it's one goal. And this can be at the organization size or the individual size. And if you have one, if you've identified one, and there are so many good causes out there, and you don't need to save the world, but if you have a good cause, something you believe in, something you want to participate and lean into, now is a perfect time, because you have the reach through technology to connect with other like-minded people and expand that and have a disproportional impact on the world because of what I told you last time. So having an MTP is fundamental for you, for your objective, your determination, your aspiration, and your purpose. But as a species, having them is something also that drives and creates a better world. I mean, and I'm in Singularity University a lot because of its MTP, which is to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. Now that is super aspirational, and whenever I have to do a talk, whenever I have to think up new solutions or look at technologies and do work for Singularity, I always look, okay, this is the main reason they're there. I believe a lot in this. Yes, I do want to have a big impact, and it helps me move forward and be creative and, hey, be here. So I'll leave you today like I left you last week, 2 weeks ago, which is find an MTP. You have the framework I talked about last time. And thinking and acting big requires almost as much effort as thinking and acting small. It's up to you. But the difference in the impact that you can make is now possible, and for you is much more rewarding. So I'll leave you with this. It's part of the exponential mindset. And it removes you from a mindset of scarcity, of difficulty, and moves you into a much more resourceful brain setting, which allows you to create more, reach more, be more. So think and act big, be more. Thank you.
And we have time for questions.
Yes, we do have time for questions. Thank you, Manuel, for sharing all this information with us. We have your first question. Every leader has the responsibility to fully understand the impact of exponential technologies at their businesses. Do you think that those who don't embrace this opportunity will be less prepared to face the future?
Wow. Yes, I definitely think they will be less prepared to face the future, because the future now, and we are being propelled to this digital era and age at a speed that we had not planned. We're going digital, and everybody had it on the agenda, but now it's not on the agenda. It's the first thing that everybody has in the key strategy meetings that they have at board level, which is, I think, is an excellent thing happening from a terrible situation. So embracing this tech is actually something that is absolutely necessary to be relevant in the future. And I think it opens a whole bunch of opportunities that you do not have if you are not digital. So follow this path with all your determination. And something I would definitely avoid is this idea that it will all go away. Somehow we'll be back to normal in a year. So we just have to hold for a year very tight, and then everything will be back. It won't be back, because those who will be adopting the digital tools and digital mindset and all these processes will be very far ahead.
Another question. If you could identify 3 steps to help companies to think and act exponentially, what will they be?
Okay. So I'd invite you to see the last talk we had, where we presented the framework of an exponential organization. And I would consider that it's very important to experiment, like startups do, right? Startups experiment through not knowing or not planning fully what the end result will be, but through engaging with the different technologies and products and services and clients to test if things will work out or not. And that's how they learn. Actually, the learning process is through experimentation. But doing this is scary, because you do not foresee what will happen, because you have to go through it. Right? So that's one, is experiment. Another one is have a wide range of interests in terms of different technologies, different businesses, be inspired by others. Who was it? The great artist that was saying that you have to steal like an artist and just basically recreate what others are doing. Go for it. Part of creativity is also that. So I think be inspired by others and kind of like copy in a good way what others are doing. That's also a very important learning process. And the third is be positive about it, because doing something new in a totally different way in such pressure moments is very hard. So I understand that for many different reasons, and we just stated 3. But if you go all in, overcome the fear, see this as an opportunity and not as a mitigation action, it will generate different results. So I think those 3 are important.
Thank you. One last question. What is the biggest difference between abundance mindset when compared with scarcity mindset?
So that's the last part. So the scarcity mindset is really thinking that energy is limited. The abundance mindset is energy is actually limitless, and this the price once installed the system is practically free because you get it from the sun, and those are very different psychological places to be, because when you are saving, you are careful, you do not want to use in a bad way, so you get preoccupied with planning and over engineering things. The other is, hey, we have an abundance of this, let's distribute it, let's put it to good use, let's not worry too much about the thing in itself, but of the results we can get out of it. And I mentioned energy, but you have a whole bunch of different areas where we are getting into an era of abundance, and that should drive our emotional state and not scarcity. Scarcity is also equated to fear. So.
Okay, so thank you, Manuel, for this webinar. I would like to remind that this is part of the Role to Play campaign promoted by NovSPE, available at role2play.novspe.pt, where you can find all the videos of the previous sessions. Tomorrow we will have another session at 6 p.m. with Jorge Veloso talking about e-commerce and the omni-channel today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Manuel.